Welcome to A Voice from the Hills. I'm James Warner, co-founder of Silicon Hills Wealth Management here in Austin, Texas. Our guest on today's podcast is Kevin Lozer. Kevin is the co-founder of Holistic Plan. Both Kevin and Roger Pines built Holistic Plan into an award-winning fintech solution that helps individuals and advisors alike deal with tax planning with a forward-thinking mindset. Kevin's joining us today to talk about the tool he and Roger built, talk about his journey toward his career as a financial advisor, talk about the passion required to hit the reset button, and to talk about his role as a father, founder, and fiduciary. So please join me in welcoming our special guest, Kevin Lozer.
James Warner is the founding partner of Silicon Hills Wealth Management and the host of A Voice from the Hills podcast. All opinions expressed by James, his co-host, and his guest are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Silicon Hills Wealth Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of Silicon Hills Wealth Management may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast.
And good afternoon, Kevin, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, James. I'm looking forward to this.
I guess we should start by congratulating me. You got your 10,000th download in April. Is that right?
Oh, 10,000th, 10,000 advisors using the software. Yeah.
Wow, man,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. And it was really cool how you guys tied it to the charitable donation to No Kid Hungry. And man, congrats, man. How'd you come up with that idea? How'd you think about celebrating your success in that way?
Well, we wanted to give back, so we realized it was a milestone that we were really proud of, and couldn't have done it without all the advisors from the very beginning, even the including the ones that were beta testers and telling us how to improve the software in the very early days before we even had a product that could be sold. So we wanted to do something that we were very excited about it. But we wanted to give back as well, and to thank everybody for helping us in the success to date.
Well, it's a very cool way to
we
celebrate a milestone, and congratulations to you guys. That's a lot of traction in a very short period of time.
Thank you. It's been a great ride so far. We're looking forward to the ride to continue. But yeah, we certainly found product market fit quickly, and the product has resonated out there in the market for sure.
So let's take a step back from Holistic Plan really quick. Let's talk about you. So you graduated from Penn State.
I did. Yep.
And it seemed like, you're just reading your writing, it seemed like you had kind of a calling for financial planning, but maybe financial planning wasn't ready for you, maybe a little too salesy or whatever. So you joined Marriott and travel around the world. What was that like?
Well, yeah, looking back, Marriott and that job in particular, those two jobs I had there were absolutely phenomenal for a 20-something kid out of college, right? I was traveling around the world, visiting hotels and other businesses that Marriott ran at that time. You get to see all parts of the world I haven't been back to: China, Australia, Costa Rica, and then tons of cities across the United States. So, absolutely phenomenal opportunity for a kid that didn't do any travel growing up. I grew up in a relatively small town and had been on an airplane one time in my life up until that point. So it was a little daunting at first, but it great experience. Marriott's, obviously pretty much everybody's heard of Marriott. They're a Fortune probably 100 or a Fortune 50 company. So great onboarding, great training program, just great management training group that I was a part of. And that's what we were doing.
When you think back to it, what was your favorite spot?
Oh, wow. Costa Rica was pretty cool. We had a courtyard hotel there that was basically part of a coffee plantation. So that was really neat. I loved experiencing China for a week and a half that I was there. Now, we were mostly in Beijing, so didn't get to go around too much, but that was definitely a great trip. One of my favorite cities, honestly, though, in the United States was Chicago. I went to Chicago tons of times, and absolutely loved going to that city. It's just a
Yeah,
cool.
it's almost impossible to have a bad time in Chicago. It's
Yeah. Yep.
and so you're really savvy with your finances early on, and that kind of helped you eventually make that career change. I'm curious, what did your financial goals and what did your financial plan look like? I mean, you're working with Marriott, but you've kind of got this passion for financial planning. You know, how did you structure your finances to help you make that leap in the future, or did you just do the best you could and kind of
Yeah.
hope things worked out?
I I definitely I think the biggest thing we did, and this really started in my late 20s when I got married, is my wife and I were very much on the same page when it came to finances, and that page included, hey, we don't know when we're going to have kids, but we want to have the flexibility if we can, that one of us could stay home if that made sense for the family and for whatever we were doing. So from the very beginning of late 20s when we got married, we decided we were in essence going to live off of one of our incomes uh, as much as we could. So even when we bought our first house, while we were pre-approved for a much larger mortgage if we wanted to, because of we were dual income, no kids at that time, we
Mhm.
decided let's buy a house that we could afford the mortgage if one of us wasn't working. And then that allowed us for several years, because we were dual income, no kids for first 6 7 years of our marriage. That allowed us to bank and save and invest. Almost a whole other salary. And that's really what I think. If I could pick one thing that it wasn't necessarily that I ran my plan through a financial planning software, or even specifically knew that I was going to change careers when I was in my late 20s. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was in my late 20s, fairly happy climbing the corporate ladder. I didn't necessarily have intentions to completely do a reset and change careers and go from making what I was making to zero for a little while. But we wanted that flexibility, and I think all the decisions we made financially, especially on the expense side, the budget side, revolved around, hey, let's try to live off of one salary the best we can.
And so now you've got that financial flexibility. You've kind of made those sacrifices, and now they're paying off in in the ability just to give you more opportunities to consider more things. And so you decide to make the leap. You decide to go do what you love. How did that kind of play out when you and Amanda were talking about it? What helped you make that decision to leave the corporate world and go back into personal finance?
Yeah, one was Amanda, my wife, was working. Again, we were living off of either one of our incomes at that time, so that certainly helped. That provides a tremendous amount of flexibility to start over again, which is basically what I was contemplating doing. Uh, because I knew, and we didn't have kids at the time, so it was either going to be that time, or what we discussed was, maybe I do it, as a second career in my, follow the early retirement type of track where I retire early in my late 50s or early 60s from the corporate world after, a 35-year career, and then do financial planning and start a business at that point. But it was something that I decided I wasn't really waiting, wasn't interested in waiting to do, and
Okay.
we could afford to do it. So I took the plunge and signed up for the CFP program at uh, Georgetown here, which I'm not too far away from, and got the ball rolling on networking in the industry, trying to figure out how I wanted to get started.
And so you get started, and then you fast forward after a few years, I guess, and you make another reset uh, to kind of start your own firm, which is it Oaktown Financial? Is that uh,
Yep, Oakton Financial. Yep, which is
and
just named after a neighboring town here.
yeah, and so you decide to do that, which is kind of another reset in and of itself. Is that when Holistic Plan started to take shape?
It was about 6 to 9 months after I started Oakton. Um, and yeah, it was a similar situation for that reset. It was actually, so I worked for the same firm, the only firm I worked for before that, a fee only advisor, and small. He was a solo planner with a couple part time people when I started there back in 2008. Interesting date. My start date actually was the day that Bear Stearns announced bankruptcy. So not exactly great timing necessarily to change careers and move from a corporate world to becoming a financial planner. Although I'll tell you what, that next year, and that was going right in the heat of the financial crisis. Boy, did I learn a lot and learn how to deal with clients' emotions. Even though I probably wasn't quite ready to deal with all that, I was new. I was still learning the business and learning financial planning. But starting with a small organization like that, where it was one advisor basically, I got to be in client meetings relatively early on, and have the advisor that I was working for and eventually partnered with mentor me and see how he reacted, see how he answered questions. So that was, while at first it didn't seem like great timing, and I was kind of like, oh, what did I do? It definitely, I learned a heck of a lot in that year that maybe would have taken 3 or 4 years during normal market conditions. So
Yeah, sure.
looking
It's
back on it, it
one of
was
those worst, best things that ever happened to me, right?
that's right. That's right. But yeah, fast forward then 10 years later, 2018, um, just decided that it was probably time to move on from that partnership. And I was interested in starting my own firm and doing a few things slightly differently. So I did that in mid 2018, but early 2019 started to think about this idea around holistic plan, and started bouncing. Roger and I started bouncing off ideas off one another. Roger had left his firm in 2018, 6 months before I did. He left in early 2018. I left midway through 2018. So I kind of knew what he had been doing for the past year, and it was software related. It wasn't holistic plan, but it was something in the financial planning space, software related. So we connected in early 2019, and that's really when we got moving on the concept of holistic plan.
So fair to say you brought kind of the scalability issues and just the tax planning, just the tax planning hurdles that we all go into to the relationship, and then Roger brought the tech.
Well, Roger's a former advisor too. So we were at first putting our heads together from both having lived the problem of doing tax planning manually. But then, yeah, Roger, in addition to being an advisor, also is a self-taught coder. So he started similar to me. He has a similar background where he started in corporate with software companies, and being a consultant, and then got into financial planning in his early 30s, just like I did, and then did that for a decade, just like I did, and then we both shifted gears and started Holistic Plan.
And so, was it always the idea of holistic plan in the beginning to be a standalone product that you might offer to other advisors, or did it start out as just a solution for you internally?
No, it did always start as something that we thought we would be able to sell to other advisors. So we definitely had uh, business inclinations from the very beginning. Like Roger wasn't an advisor anymore at that point. He was trying to and had been spending about a year or so trying to figure out what his next business was going to be, and I was recognizing that maybe I didn't want to build a large RIA, and we had this idea about scaling financial planning via technology and software. So that's how we really got started. But from the very beginning, we were using what we learned from not only our respective firms, but being involved in NATFA, and that's how Roger and I met actually back in 2015. But knowing peers in our industry were also dealing with the same struggle, we thought we could
So
build something
similar
that could
mission
solve the problem.
statement. You guys just managed to crack the code a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And from the very beginning, we got our friends in the business that we've known for many years to beta test and tell us what was working, what wasn't working, what was helping, what wasn't helping. The very initial products, actually, that Roger and I worked on back in February and March, at the very early days of 2019, wasn't tax related, and it had nothing to do with the OCR technology where you as the advisor get to upload a return and get something. It was data entry driven, and it was actually more on the insurance side than the
Oh
tax
wow.
planning
So
side.
holistic planning in itself was a little bit of a pivot.
Yeah, we pivoted pretty early. Once Roger kind of put the first prototype together, again, it was on the insurance side. It was a lot of fields to enter data for, and we were both thinking, well, who's going to do this? Is it the advisor? Is it the client? And then I was like, I don't think anybody's going to do it. But I had been involved in an angel investing network for quite a number of years, and saw a business that pitched that group a while previously that was not in the OCR space, but it let me mention to Roger that, hey, there the technology is out there now, and I didn't know what it was called, but the technology is out there now where you should be able to take a picture or upload a document and the data gets extracted. Because I had seen something like that similar, where you take a picture of a photo ID, your driver's license, and you can
Oh
get a
sure.
quote. So I said, what about that? That way we don't have to, the advisors don't have to enter data, or a client doesn't have to enter data. And then Roger's give him credit. He's the one that kind of went back and did a lot of research and figured out the OCR technology. And that's one, again, kind of like we were talking about earlier. Once that was sort of the game changer, was
Yeah, I mean,
when
to me,
we
that's actually the hallmark of a holistic plan is that ease of data transfer. It's that it is the OCR. It's like let's just scan this, and then all of a sudden we already have work product. I mean, we can manipulate it after the fact, but the idea of I think there's this period of time between committing to do something and getting output. I don't know really what it's called, but the holistic plan has shortened that period to almost nothing, right? Okay, I commit. I want to do this. Let's go. Okay, let's scan it, and now we have something. I mean, there's a very very short window of upload time. I think that's maybe one of the hallmarks of it. I think my favorite piece is actually kind of that evaluation piece that you walk through. I call it the means test gauntlet, uh, but it's really helpful in that it's one of the first metrics that I've seen automatically put in place that takes somebody through their return and talks about all the things that they may qualify for or may not qualify for, mentions them, and then very briefly says yes, no, maybe. Um, and to me, that really, for clients who've really gone through it, I mean, that is the one moment where they go, wow, there are a lot of things at play here in this tax return that maybe I didn't realize. Uh,
right.
and so, how did all that come into place? Did you, when you started, was it just computational in this? Was it just the computational things, or how did you decide to go in and add those different aspects to it, where you had kind of that qualitative evaluation standard that you get with the program?
Yeah, it started with Roger and my idea of it was just that bullet point observations that are at the bottom of that report, um, and it was rudimentary. It wasn't really a deliverable at all. It was really more of an expert system where you upload a document and you get actionable observations or things to at least consider. It was, again, going back to thanking our beta testers and early adopters. It was feedback we received from some of our friends in the industry that said, yeah, this is great, fascinating, but I'd love to be able to put something in front of a client and turn it into a report. And that's when Roger and I kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit and said, let's create a deliverable out of it. And what would be on that deliverable? What are all the things that we thought about and worried about and ticked and tied to when we would manually review a tax return? And the one you're referring to is, I think, that MAGI thresholds and all the various things, like what are the limits for Roth conversion or IRA deductibility and net investment income tax. that was something that both Roger and I, in our respective firms, I had like this little cheat sheet of all the various brackets and all the various limits that I needed to be aware of, and I would have to just manually look at my rudimentary Excel spreadsheet and see what their taxable income in and quite honestly, unfortunately, sometimes incorrectly calculate MAGI in my spreadsheet because there's 6 different formulas for
Yeah, there's about
MAGI.
6 or 7 different formulas.
Right. Uh,
Kinda easy to miss it if you, just do it offhand.
right. Yeah. Again, this all kind of the premise was we were doing all this stuff manually, and quite honestly, in hindsight, not 100% accurately. And when you identify those opportunities, and that's exactly what software is built for and created for, that thing that you're going to do, that repetitive process where you're going to get similar results or you want to look at similar statistics or similar results every single time.
Yeah, and the other thing I noticed is that we tend to segment our tax planning into the problem of the day. Is it a Roth conversion? Is it are we looking at taxability of Social Security? Or are we looking at IRMA? What are we looking at, right? And so we tend to look at those things through a silo. And your program was the first one that, yes, if I want to look at it as a silo, that's fine. But you also have all these other things that come into play at the same time. And
Mhm.
I think that's a huge component because I think most people that are dealing with their taxes are dealing with either a CPA or a tax preparer who is, for lack of a better word, just kind of bound by the past. I mean, they're always looking at that last year's return because that's what they're supposed to do. I mean, their charge is to build a correct and accurate and full representation of the client's taxable year for the prior year. And they would come to us for the forward planning, and maybe they would come to the CPA for the forward planning on what would my retirement contribution be if this, and how much, why did I pay so much in taxes? Can I, is there an offset for these capital gains? Am I paying 28%? Am I paying 20? What is QBI? I mean, there's always these like these one or two things that come up, right? But those things were hardly ever explained in a comprehensive fashion where you could see that maybe they all interrelated. Maybe my Roth conversion decision wasn't something that was made in isolation. Maybe as I'm making that, I can also think about, these other things that are at play. And I think that's the hallmark of your program, because what it does is actually a very good complement to the CPA who's really trying to get that accurate representation. It's a really good curation of information for the advisor who's trying to forward plan, and it makes it very easy to share between the two. And so I think you've given us all the tool and the ability to be successful. And how we use it, I guess, is kind of the holy grail of whether or not it lives up to its potential. But I think the software itself is just fantastic. So
Well, thank you.
congratulations to both you and Roger for what you've done.
Thank you. Appreciate
Um,
that, James. And yeah, you're right. We've built it with the intent, and the way I use it in my small RIA, I've got a handful of clients, is a collaboration tool with the CPA. It's not something that we're doing necessarily instead of the CPA or trying to compete with the CPAs. I work with every one of my client CPAs, show them what I'm doing in Holistic Plan, and say, hey, do you agree with this? And this is the strategy I'm thinking of doing. And it's often we need to do that as advisors, because oftentimes the CPA doesn't know what the financial plan is for their client. To your point, they're looking to make sure their job is fundamentally to make sure that they don't come across the IRS, right? That they do the tax preparation correctly, and they're looking backwards, and they've been conditioned for so long to also do whatever they can to save money in taxes in this year, right? Or sometimes though a Roth conversion, right? That's money you're choosing to pay in taxes. You're increasing your taxes this year to do a Roth conversion. Um, to be able to convince the CPA to kind of take that type of different approach requires the CPA to understand what the overall financial plan and the big picture reason is for all of that. And that's where the advisor and the client and the CPA can be working together to collaborate on that bigger picture.
So as you utilize this as both a financial planner and a developer of the product, what's your favorite piece of functionality of Holistic Plan? If you could only use one piece of, if you could only use one section, what would it be?
Yeah, good question. I'm gonna cheat a little bit and say two, because one
I'll give you
is
two.
all right. One is the upload process, right? I think one of my favorite parts about it is the fact that I can just upload the PDF tax return, and I have all of that data entry, in essence, completed for me. I haven't had to enter a piece of information. So that's the first piece. But then after that, what I use the most is the what we call a range calc screen, the range calculator. That's part of the scenario analysis tool that will show you, hey, if I add income to this given year to the scenario that I've built, where do I come across certain phase outs and thresholds that increase my marginal tax rate by a lot of times a lot much larger number than I anticipated. It identifies all of what Michael Kitces often called the tax torpedoes, I think was his terminology. The
Sure.
hidden little things in the tax code that is more than just the bracket that you're in, whether it's NIIT or I won't get into all the acronyms, but there are lots of different ways that a tax rate can sneak up on a consumer and go from 12% to 27% just like that with $1 of additional income. Or you mentioned IRMA. You go across an IRMA threshold. You go $1 over that IRMA threshold, and now you're paying higher Medicare uh, premiums 2 years from now. You can't go backwards on that, and it's $1 difference. So being able to see that in a picture in the range calc screens to make sure that I'm not over overdoing a Roth conversion or underdoing a donor advised fund strategy or whatever it may be. That to me is the most beneficial part of the software.
So now, for the most part, you've kind of got the federal 1040 nailed. I mean, it's I guess not the most standardized document in the world, but standardized enough where the OCR works.
Mhm.
Are there plans in the works to bring that level of standardization down to states? Are there any particular states you're working on as as you're going into the process? Are you starting with the larger states, or is there even a plan to bring that? What does the roadmap, I guess, look like for Holistic Plan going forward?
Yeah, so as it relates to states, we made the determination that the 44 different state tax returns are different and not standardized enough to try to use OCR technology to read that data in. But the good news is that in almost every case, every state, they're starting with a federal number. And in a lot of other cases, there aren't tons of additional state nuances associated with needing to read in all of that data. So what we've decided to do, and it's still in beta, we're going to be a lot. We have lots of advisors using it though in beta, but we're going to launch it here soon, where everybody's going to be able to use the scenario analysis screen at the state level too. So we'll pull in the federal numbers that we're getting from the federal tax return that are related to that specific state tax calculation. The advisor may have to enter three numbers or maybe a handful of numbers that are state specific to get to the state tax liability. But we've streamlined it enough where we still feel we're being true to our original mission and objective of getting advisors out of the data entry process by streamlining that state tax calculator engine enough where they just need to enter a few pieces of information that are state specific, and we're going to give them the state tax liability.
And so, will they be able to, like, if somebody's a non-resident versus a full year resident, or maybe they have like a professional athlete who might have allocated time in multiple states, right? Um,
Mm.
will the advisor be able to go in and actually do something to that level?
So we're working on making that more streamlined too. They would be able to do that even now by going into the household screen and running a bunch of different scenarios where they change the state for that client. So
Right.
they'd end up having a bunch of different households for that athlete in that example that
So you
are
might
all the
have
same
7 or 8
name.
different households underneath the one athlete just to get that data, but it's gettable, right?
It's gettable. Yes,
Uh,
exactly right. Yep.
well, that's very cool. Now, of course, we have the elephant in the room, and that's Congress. Uh, so what happens when there's a significant or even an insignificant tax bill? I mean, I know Jeff Levine's always great about putting together those multi scenario memes that he puts out on Twitter to tell us how we're getting screwed by the new tax legislation. Um,
Yeah, those
so
are great.
two point question here: how do you, as a company, uh, respond to that? Because obviously you have to change you have to change your system when the law changes.
Mhm.
And then two, what's it like working with Jeff Levine?
Yeah, it's great. So you're right. You identified gate number one for us, which is Jeff lets us know when things are coming down the pike from a congressional and legislation standpoint, and helps digest all of that for us. And then it's up to our product development team. Then pretty much depending on how much changes, like Jeff and Roger, and we've got a couple other folks on the team that are digesting it and seeing how it impacts our calculations or our observations in product. And then once that's determined, we then decide, okay, is this big enough changes where we need the entire product development team to stop what they're doing and start coding this stuff? Or is it something that a subset of our team can do and we still get it out there? Because one of the things we've been adamant about and have delivered on from the very beginning is when there are those types of legislation changes, and there's been several: the CARES Act, the Secure Act, the one I forget the name of it that was at the end of 2021. We are adamant about getting that into our software in the shortest amount of time possible. And so far, we've done all of those. Every single time, it's been less than 2 weeks that we've had everything coded in our product, reflecting the new legislation. Or in the case where we've got pending stuff like the sunsetting of the current tax law in 2025, we've built the ability for the advisor to go in and see it both ways. So that, I
Wow,
mean, that's our
that's pretty
process. It's,
impressive.
yeah,
So
stop everything
from the
and
time we've
focus on
got
it.
new tax legislation till the time you're live and ready to go is 2 weeks.
It has been thus far. Yeah. Now, if legislation, if there's
Wow.
a whole nother rewrite, then who knows? But yeah, so far
You
that's
know,
the case.
well, I know past performance isn't indicative of a future result, but still, I mean that's shockingly good. I'm amazed. Awesome, awesome work.
Yeah,
Let's
thank you.
change gears for a second and talk about your work with New Dominion Angels. I was kind of interested to learn a little bit about that. I guess maybe that actually did play a role in the OCR development of Holistiplan, right? Um,
Yeah.
what have you learned from working with the group, and are you active with private equity and seed funding, angel capital, stuff like that?
So I am still a member of the group. I started with that group back when I was changing careers the first time back into financial planning. The managing member, the founder of that New Dominion Angels group, was actually in my CFP program curriculum at Georgetown, and ever since he's been a friend and mentor of mine. He asked me in 2009. He knew I was at that time transitioning into financial planning and working part time. So I did a little moonlighting for the group that he was just starting, helping with due diligence of the startup companies that were pitching to the group. And at that time, the group was only 10, 15 people, if that. But so I was actually working for them for a little while, moonlighting, and then became a member a couple years after that, and have been a member now for a decade or so. and yeah, it's been instrumental, I'd say, in my experience with starting Holistic Plan and growing Holistic Plan over the past couple years, seeing hundreds and hundreds of startup companies go out there and trying to raise funds through angels, seeing what was working, what wasn't working, how they looked at their business, how they expected to grow their business rapidly. Uh, Seeing both the things that worked and didn't work was very helpful, and helped Roger and me determine, what did we want to do from that standpoint, for the business. Did we want to go down that fundraising route or not? All of that experience helped a great deal. Having the network and the mentorship that I've had from, particularly the managing director, has been tremendous. Being able to bounce ideas off of him, again, and he's someone who's been an entrepreneur and sold a company. So it's been. Tell some folks around here that are thinking about joining. It's not necessarily about investment returns. At least my experience has been the biggest benefit hasn't been investment returns or getting a big 10 bagger type of investment out of investing in a startup. It's really been the learning that I've gotten out of that, and the networking that I've gotten out of that. What I've learned more about what a startup is, and how to build and run a startup has been the most beneficial thing for me.
Yeah, because it is a unique mindset and skill. It's not something that is is just readily available to most people. I mean, you kind of have to learn it. You kind of have to think things through that. Think through that lens of of private equity and risk taking, and it's kind of interesting. So that I think that's one reason why we don't see as many financial planners or accountants or people like that who come up with solutions to problems. I think that's one reason we don't see them take the next step and try to make that publicly available. It's just that the just the foreign nature of actually doing something like that is a big hill to climb. So I was kind of interested to see that in your background. So let's talk about hitting the reset button. You've done it a couple times. You think you've done it for the last time, or you think you'll be hitting it again?
I think I've done it for the last time. Yeah, uh, this has been so much fun, and still having a toe in the waters of being a planner too, right? Because I still do have the RIA where it's just myself. I foresee doing that for a long time to come. Keeping, but probably as a lifestyle business, keeping it small, just because I enjoy the subject matter. I enjoy working with a small group of clients. So I foresee doing that for a very, very long time. And Holistic Plan has been. I mean, it's been such a great ride. We're having a good time. We've built. It's in less than 3 years, we've gone from just me and Roger doing everything to 27 team members. We just all got together we've grown by 10, 15 team members over the past 2 years each year. And every year we get together, we bring the whole group together somewhere. We did it in Austin, actually, in July at Lost Pines.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, had an absolute great time meeting half the company for the first time in my case, right? I mean, of course, you meet them over Zoom and have conversations with them, but actually being able to uh, have face-to-face meetings and hang out with everybody for a couple of days, that really brings home the fun that we're having, and the excitement that we have to continue to build this company uh, in a way where we're continuing to bring people on board and continuing to get the word out, because we've still only scratched the surface when it comes to the number of advisors that are out there in the world, and the ones that are using our software. We started this conversation with the 10,000 number, the number of advisors that we had using the software as of April or May, and now that's closing in on 12,000. But there's hundreds of thousands of advisors out there.
Right. Yeah,
So
you're still just maybe you've gotten through the early adopters. I'm not sure if you have yet or not, but uh,
yeah, we've
I'm,
got
I'm not
a
sure
long
what
runway.
that number is, but you've got a ways to go, I would imagine. So you've accumulated some labels over time: father, husband, founder, partner, and fiduciary. I think those are all that are all labels that are important to you. What do these passions mean to you, and how do they kind of coalesce around each other as you go further into your into that into that journey as a founder and a partner and father, husband? All those things are kind of dynamically changing over time. How do you nurture each one of those passions and give it the right attention and the right place in your world?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a deep question too. I hope I'm doing a good job of it all. You mentioned another word there, fiduciary, and I think that goes back to my career change. I knew from the very beginning I wanted to be a fiduciary, and I think that word though can goes over all those various labels, right? Father, husband, partner. Oftentimes you need to maybe sacrifice a little bit of what you would ideally do if you were all by yourself, or what you absolutely would want to do or think you should do, and work it out with your partners or spouses or in kids, and put them first, like you're doing as a fiduciary advisor. You're putting your clients first, and that's always above your own interests, and that's always resonated with me. And I'd like to think that that's maybe the tie that I use across all those labels. Try my best. It's certainly no one's perfect. I'm not either, but I try my best to make sure I'm doing what I think is also in the best interest of those other parties, whoever they may be as well.
Well, wow, what a great answer! I loved how you tied that all together. It was kind of a tough question, and you really nailed it. So, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations to you and Roger on everything that's going on with Holistic Plan. Next time you guys are in Austin, though, we definitely need an invitation. We'd like to come join you guys and meet the team. But thank you so much for spending some time with us, and we appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, James. Appreciate the invite. This has been great. And yeah, we will definitely let you know when we're in Austin.
All right, thank you. And that's a wrap for our podcast conversation with Kevin Lozer. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us. And thank you so much for sharing your vision and passion that ultimately led to the development of Holistic Plan and bringing it to market. It's just another example of how necessity is truly the mother of invention. We hope that you all enjoyed our conversation with Kevin. If you did, please subscribe to our Voice from the Hills podcast. We are available on all podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about Silicon Hills Wealth and what we do and how we service clients, please check us out on the web at siliconhillswealth.com. And we want to remind you once again that we so much appreciate you listening and sharing our content, as we can only do our best work when you are here to listen. Thank you.